inflation is going to take a while to get back to 2%. Basically, we see some sticky inflation. The Fed's going to continue to bang away at interest rates more than the market's pricing in. And I think the case for that is like the Fed is in this credibility crisis.
Like the fucking fact that like somebody's getting assassinated that
Country
was the
with
head
very
of
little
state.
gun
A
violence.
lot of the Western world right now is past the peak of their power. We're entering like stage 5, which is right before stage 6. Stage 6 is revolt and like civil war.
Do you think we're going to have a World War III? And if so, what's it going to look like? The pebble of sand on a beach is a monstrous idea, right? And that yet is small for what the universe is. And yet, if you take that entire container of what we're really thinking about and talking about, looking at with the James Webb Telescope, that is 5% of the universe. Where are the aliens? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, DGens and DGenettes, to another episode of the Alfalfa Podcast. We are 4 radically moderate entrepreneurs and investors swimming in the messy gray ocean, serving up alpha in money, politics, and life. We are Nick Urbani, Eric Johansson, I am Arman Asadi, and Steven, the personality, Cesaro, is in Tulum, joining the Tuluminati this week. We miss
God,
you.
you convinced him.
Steven, we miss you.
He might come back a different person.
Yeah, he actually might.
Yeah.
Do you think he'll come back with a
0%.
different wardrobe?
0% chance.
I don't know, like henna tattoos. What are you getting into Tulum?
I just want to see him like open chest, like really just exposed
He's all
chest.
bronzed.
Just some beads around the neck. Yeah,
Nice.
That'll be great. We'll miss you, Steven. All links at alfalfapod.com. Make sure to hit subscribe wherever you are listening. And, of course, follow us on socials and hop into our community on Discord for the after party. Actually, one idea I had is if you are an existing listener, it would be awesome and really appreciate it if you pick one favorite episode and you send that episode to a handful of friends. I think that'd be a really cool way to support us and just spread the word. All right, boys, very excited. Cheers.
Cheers, salud.
What are you guys drinking?
Cheers.
I have a Modelo inside my prototype Alfalfa.
Can you show
coffee
that
mug.
for the YouTube?
Oh, they're not gonna be able to see it. You got to get in the Discord to see the.
We
see
got
the
mugs.
prototype.
Can you describe it? You got the wheat emoji.
Got our icon emoji on one side and the phrase "radically moderate" on the other.
All right, yeah, I'm on Casamigos. Still waiting on that sponsorship. Coming soon.
You want
hopefully.
the Sleep 8 one or the Casamigos one first?
I want the Casa first.
Okay.
And then after I get enough Casa in my body, then I need to take it to the mattress.
Because their temperature rises. I'm drinking the Mezcal, where we started. This is like actually, I would say this is a very good entry level, inexpensive Mezcal. Mezcal artesanal.
Oh, artisanal.
Shikaru.
I've been neglecting the mezcal. I need to go back there soon.
It's nice.
Right after this.
Less of a hangover. Awesome. So on the agenda today, there is obviously an incredible amount of stuff going on in the markets. So yes, you guessed it. For Money Today, we're talking about the markets. We're recording this episode currently on Wednesday, July 13th. Nick will be opening up about that. New CPI numbers, updated numbers. For politics, we'll be talking about, is the world falling apart? And is World War III happening soon? Is it inevitable? And then for life, something we're really excited about. Hopefully we're a little sloshy by that time. We want to talk about, where are all the aliens?
Aliens.
Get out there.
Where
are all the aliens?
I want to get sloshy by segment 2.
Okay.
I'm excited about number 2.
Okay. So let's do Alfalfa Round. Why don't you kick off here?
Well, okay. So I went short as AF. I went short AF over the weekend, and shorts were just printing, and I knew inflation was coming hot. I was surprised by the market's response to inflation. Inflation came in, CPI number came out today, 9.1% CPI. And as soon as that number came out, like, markets just bounced. Markets bounced. My shorts, have turned from profitable to flat-ish. But when we get into the market segment, we can talk more about it. But yeah, I shorted everything. Like every coin, every DeFi token, every metaverse token, every stonk. Like, I'm just short the world right now.
Wow.
Yeah, like Steven's gone, but I'll pick up
kind of taking the torch.
nihilist mantle.
Oh my god.
Let's see. I spent the week basically just like rage watching my SPY puts and my ETH bids. So I had some puts in place, I think, 2 weeks ago. And again, I woke up right at the market open and everything was right in the world. And then it kind of had a little reversal after that CPI print. And then, just patiently waiting for my triple digit ETH bids to take place. And those are the two things I'm kind of focusing my time on: hedging the kind of portfolio that's managed with some equities in it, and then hopefully my bids get put into action for ETH. God, I'd be so happy. I would be so happy.
All right,
what do you got?
I got a life alfalfa and a finance money one. Okay. So first of all, for the life one, the Steven's mention of best life purchase, most valuable life purchase of 8 sleep pod mattress cover is here. I'm on night number 4. And overall, I would just say it's an incredible piece of technology. Like, I'm actually astonished at like what it does. It's an incredible thing. Like, because there is the chili pad. A lot of people knew about the chili pad before. This is like a dual zone. One side can go up to 105 degrees. The other side can go down to 55 degrees. It's measuring your sleep. It's like an Aura ring and a chili pad and a fucking sleep you to bed device all in one. Like, it's incredible.
I got questions for you.
I know. We could probably talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Well, just very quickly.
Yeah.
You said you have a very nice mattress underneath this topper. Like, does it compromise the beauty of the mattress?
There is a compromise happening. Absolutely. But that compromise, I think, is net positive overall. Because while I'm losing the beauty of the Tempur-Pedic mattress and that like
just a bit of the beauty.
Yeah, a bit of the beauty. I'm losing 20. I'm losing a good chunk.
Yeah.
I'm losing like 15-20% of that like melt into the bed feeling. But in exchange, I'm falling asleep so much faster.
That's key.
And staying asleep throughout the night because the temperature of the bed is exactly where I want it. And it's amazing how many different people want it different ways.
You ever think about just like wearing it as a cape? It's pretty hot right now. It's hot right now in this room.
It's like the Harry Potter invisible cloak.
Quick question: does anyone take any sleep medication, or not medication, but like sleep aids?
I tried some herbal remedies recently.
Oh, that's
this like valerian root I was recommended.
You sure that's for sleep?
Yeah,
that's what they told me. And then I tried this magnesium. Like
zinc magnesium,
this very particular type of magnesium, and I'm getting the weirdest nightmares.
The dreams are intense on magnesium.
So gnarly.
I can't take it. They're too intense.
You've had that before?
Oh yeah, I had it.
Okay, so
those are two things that are typically in a normal stack for like a sleep pill, for an herbal sleep pill. So I will not unless I need to.
Okay.
I don't want to.
I'm the
rely
same.
on
Where
anything.
like if I really need to sleep.
No, I just had to recalibrate after a 4th of July week. And I tried it, and I was having the worst nightmares.
Yeah, I take one, I think it's on Amazon, called Nirvana. But anything similar to Nirvana has they all have like magnesium, valerian root, melatonin, which I'm a little bit weird about melatonin as well. That can really mess with your dreams. And they have like just a few other herbs in there and vitamins that like help you sleep.
These are nightmares I can't wake up from. I'm in them.
Oh.
I'm in them, and I'm like...
They get so intense I wake up, and it actually distribs my sleep. That's how intense they get.
Well, I mean, it's disturbing when you're in it.
When wants to trip out, he's zinc magnesium mix.
Our meal prep guy, what was his name?
I forget his name.
Yeah, he put me on something one time that really fucked with my dreams, but it relaxed.
Maybe
me.
you want that. Maybe some people want that.
Yeah, if you want to enter a different dimension. I was going to do a money one, but we've gone on too long in the Alfalfa round. So let's move on. Let's go to money.
All right, let's talk about markets. So, we wanted to reserve this one to just talk about the markets in general, just because we had a CPI print today, like Eric mentioned, 9.1% compared to a year ago in June. The estimate was about 8.8%. Core CPI rose 5.9% compared to the 5.7% estimate. That excludes the food and energy categories. I mean, I think the biggest ones were like gasoline, groceries, rent were the standouts in terms of what spiked
from CPI. But just to remember that CPI doesn't include housing in a very accurate way, right? Housing's up 20%, and they're calling it 5%.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that too.
Yeah.
And then you adjust for inflation, workers' hourly wages fell 1%.
That's big.
Yeah, that's I think that's abnormal from what we've seen. So I guess like I'm interested in kind of making the case for why we're going to go lower in the stock market, the economy, and then potentially the crypto markets. I think there's like three things at play. Like inflation is going to take a while to get back to 2%. Basically, we see some sticky inflation, and we can talk about the details of each of these points. Two, the Fed's going to bang away at us with interest rates higher than what the market's expecting. And then third, we're going to see some kind of earnings recession that analysts haven't priced in. And so those three things are going to potentially like lead us into a leg lower in markets. And we could talk about how that might affect the crypto markets, but I think it seems, I don't know, it seems pretty obvious for the public markets. And I think that's like my personal base case of what's going to happen. So I don't know. I got some notes and data we can kind of dive into.
Go ahead.
All right, let's do it. So the CPI number, like 32.5% of the CPI number is housing. And they use this, and I think you alluded to this, they use this metric called owner's equivalent rent. And it's a weird way of measuring it, but essentially they're trying to measure rent and how much it costs to have shelter. And what we've seen is that it continues to increase 12 to 18 months after you see the peak divergence from home price appreciation and rent. So when home price appreciation is really high and the disparity between that and rent is the highest, that's 12 to 18 months after that is when you see actual rent prices peak. So that peaked in November of last year. So we could potentially see another 6 to 12 months of rents increasing as measured by their formula. So you might feel like, well, I feel like rents are flattening out or decreasing, but what matters is what goes into that CPI metric. And it's a lagging and it's a terrible metric to use. But in terms of how the measurement is taken, that number typically, historically, doesn't peak till 12 to 18 months after. And so, when you have a third of the CPI look like it could still be increasing, it gets a little nervous in terms of how sticky this inflation rate could be.
Right, but on the other hand, you got all these commodities. You got commodity prices that have collapsed mid-June, right? So like precious metals, copper, oil, these are all down.
They're like 20-something% of the formula, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
but they're down, as much as rent would be up.
Sure. But you also have food increasing at roughly 12%.
Definitely increasing.
So food is increasing.
Right.
And then like core goods. So like if you exclude like energy, food, just like things like apparel, this is mainly stuff we buy from China. Let's be honest. Like that's where most of these core goods come from. So while like zero COVID policy in China decreases the demand for oil because like they're staying at home, Chinese population is staying home, not doing much. But zero COVID also increases the supply chokehold on goods. So it's not a good sign that goods inflation is increasing, and that is increasing at a faster rate than it was at the beginning of the year. So I think there's a good case for inflation could be stickier.
Definitely.
So that's like kind of like point one, that inflation
like
could be stickier.
You're not calling whether or not it's a peak at 9.1% CPI. You're just saying that the inflation being high could last longer than we ever imagined.
Yeah, and I'm making the argument that the peak doesn't matter. I feel like we're really impatient in terms of like, when's the peak? Because that peak will signal when the Fed will ease. And that's not how this works.
But just to be clear, that's why we're talking about this, is because we want to know when the Fed is going to pivot to easing, because that is going to drive valuations of all these things that we invest in. Really, like the Fed monetary policy is really driving stock market, crypto market, everything now.
Yeah, but I think before they reverse and start to ease, they need to stop increasing. And then the part that's missing is like the flattening out. Maybe they might stay for a while, because after inflation likely comes deflation, right? And that deflationary regime is very different than all risk assets going up again. So so that could be coming up. So I think the case for the second point is like the Fed's going to continue to bang away at interest rates more than the market's pricing in. And I think the case for that is like the Fed is in this credibility crisis. So we all heard them say the word transitory a million times, probably as much as we say the word markets. And
Dante's hammered already.
We have some friends in the Discord playing a drinking game anytime we say the word market. So don't play that drinking game with the Fed in 2021 talking about transitory. They're facing a credibility crisis. So do you think they want to make the same mistake again, saying we're going to flatten inflation and go soft? No, they're not going to do that.
It's pretty clear they're going to swing the pendulum too far the other way. They're going to over-tighten, and they're going to happily lead us into a dramatic recession, is my take.
Yeah. And the scary part about it is, like, I think when I was at NFT NYC, I was watching Jerome Powell in front of the Senate, and he's basically telling them, like, I can't control energy prices. Like, I can raise interest rates and blunt demand, but he's using this very blunt object while also acknowledging that he doesn't have control over everything. So imagine someone who really needs to show credibility, needs to show resolve and commitment to get inflation down, and he's using this really blunt object to do it. And he's going to have to, like, hit it over the head a bunch of times in order to make sure it goes down, because he's not sure if it's going to go down if he can't control oil prices and energy prices.
Why do you say happily? Eric? I find that very interesting.
Well, it's not happily. It's just the lesser of two evils. The idea is that, like, all they can do, they have one tool, and the tool is to just, like, squash demand. And they're going to control inflation by just squashing demand. That's all they can do. And the alternative is they don't do that, and inflation runs rampant and destroys our economy, like destroys the whole structure of our economy. And
is this what we would almost refer to as a choiceless choice?
Yeah, I guess you're sort of like given the choice between something that is going to ruin us versus something that's going to ruin us in the short term. And they're going to choose this short-term ruin.
I think they're more worried about runaway inflation than they are crushing us all,
for a couple of years.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And so to your point is that the Fed has two mandates. It's inflation and unemployment. And even though we saw in the unemployment numbers that there's some softening. We saw in the CPI that real wages are going down. But if you compare now versus the 5-year period before COVID, you still see that private payrolls are growing at twice the rate they were for the 5-year period before COVID. So let's call it normal times. Mm-hmm. We're still growing at double the rate. Also, if you just look at private sector income is growing 2x what it was for COVID. And then you look at the labor market participation rate, and it still hasn't grown since we've kind of had this like post-COVID, the circling of the R word, recession.
Well, that great resignation idea where people just like quit their jobs, started doing their own thing from home, that still hasn't come back, and it might not. But I think it gets a little more complicated because the labor market is sort of showing at face value that it's very strong, right? Like we have like really low unemployment, but the number of jobs total has decreased from pre-COVID.
Right.
So like I'm sort of just looking at it from how you describe, like the Fed's dual mandate. Obviously labor looks okay.
Looks great. I think it looks great from their standpoint. Not like okay. It looks on fire.
It's running hot. Labor's running hot. They can continue to tighten. They're going to continue tightening longer than the market expects. And I think that's what we're talking about here. It's like what's going to happen versus what's expected.
Yeah. So if you paint the picture, you got Jerome Powell has got two levers he really is only supposed to care about, which is inflation and the labor market. And you don't have people coming back in the labor market. Like you don't have more supply of people to fill these jobs. So there's going to be somewhat of a labor shortage, and we're still running above where we were pre-COVID. So it's like, well, this other lever, I can keep smashing it down and everything's going to be okay. So I think we're setting up for the Fed not to be afraid to keep hitting interest rates and increasing.
Okay, can I drop the quote? Drop the quote. I tweeted. It's like a 42 macro. Darius Dale, really good. On his latest presentation, it was like from a week ago. He said, "We're going to take an aluminum bat to the market's knees until inflation cries uncle."
Right.
And then he goes further to say, if you're not positioned for this, that's on you.
Right. And and we always say like we like to follow all kinds of different people, but you generally want to follow people who've been right in like the most recent regime, and he's been pretty right in terms of his calls.
He's a good macro analyst, and right now it's a time where macro is sort of the driver.
Right. So yeah, this is part of his kind of base case is that the Fed's going to just keep hammering interest rates because the other metric they're looking at, labor market's fine. The only one that I think that kind of takes into matter is like if the credit markets start to burst and you could see like a systemic thing going on, that could happen. But I think they got a lot of room to run. So that's I think
debt definitely looks okay compared to the credit bubble bursting in 2007, 2008. Like credit looks fine right now.
Yeah, the spreads don't look too crazy, and I think they have more, especially on the junk bond, like I don't know what you call it, like B-level debt. Probably anyone who would give my companies like a line of credit, like they're like, yeah, that's where ours would be,
Like I'm not even too worried about corporate debt. I think there would be like little pockets that could burst. Like auto loans have looked just ridiculous for over a decade, and that still continues to just inflate. That bubble continues to inflate, and maybe that's the one that goes. But
yeah, when they securitize the debt, there's someone there to buy it. Saying, yeah, we'll bet on this debt. We'll buy the debt. We'll take the income from it. We'll take the risk.
And I'm just looking at like the originations. Like they're giving auto loans to people that like wouldn't qualify for sort of anything. But it's just like, yeah, as long as you sign your name on this paper, we'll give you a car.
Yeah. So I think the conclusion from this section of like the Fed's going to go interest rates is that there will be no quick pivot. It's not like, oh shit, we overdid it. Like let's pivot. It's going to be this very slow, drawn-out process that's likely to be painful because we've seen a 20% dip.
They're going to pivot when inflation on core PCE gets to 2.5%. Nothing else. Like they're going to pivot then. So that's why inflation, that number matters.
So let's go into the third point, which is that we're going to see an earnings type of recession. Like basically, growth will decline, profits will decline. There'll be an earnings recession, and the key point is that the market is not pricing it in yet. So like analysts, I think the general consensus is that earnings for this earnings period is still pricing in like a 10% year-over-year growth rate, which is kind of insane. That most analysts
freaking insane.
And then if you look historically, analysts typically lag.
They always lag. Right.
Because they're waiting for feedback from the company.
To see a sell-side analyst report is so funny. They just literally just take the data that happened and then write a report on that, and then they extrapolate from there. That's like the job.
That's
right.
The job.
And so on the Alfalfa podcast in our community, we don't want to lag the market. We want to try to somewhat predict or use some data or some insights.
So let me go a step further. Okay. I think you're right. Earnings are going to fall out. So if you look at a PE ratio, there's two inputs, right? It's the price and the earnings. So the price multiple has contracted, and that's like been what has brought the market
Facebook's
down.
at like a 13.
No. Right. Okay. Yeah. Maybe Facebook is. Google's at about 20. The S&P 500 is still at 17 times earnings, which is still like average-ish, maybe slightly above average. Like we have room to fall further on multiple compression still, not even taking into account earnings. Like if we go
forward-looking earnings or like just current earnings?
Forward.
Okay.
So like if we go into a recession, obviously multiples don't stay at average. They go below. So we can even compress on multiples, not even counting that earnings are still too high, earnings estimates.
This is another 42 macro stat that I saw. We've never seen a 2% decline in core PCE in a 18 to 24 month period without causing a mild or deep recession. Like not like a slight technical recession where we see GDP just go lower than zero for 2 quarters in a row, like a depression that we all remember. Okay, a recession that we all remember.
Yeah. So was that a Freudian? Slip or?
Yeah. So I think it's pretty clear we're going to be headed into something that is going to be ugly, right? It's going to be an ugly recession where people are getting laid off, and it's going to be, we've lived through these a couple times, and it sucks for a while. I just want to play devil's advocate a little bit because, like, while we can predict the economy and everything, the market is its own animal, right? And the market's going to front run the economy and everything. And like, I think, particularly with the market environment we're in now, I said that I'm like heavily short. Mm-hmm. I'm at a risk. I don't think in like the medium term, but I'm at a near term risk because like everyone is on the short side. It's like an overcrowded trade. I think there can be a convergence. This is something that Darius Dale also talked about. It's like when everyone's on the short side, like there can be a pop, but any pop, I would be just selling broadly.
So, because everyone feels bearish doesn't mean they're fully now positioned. Like you just recently went net short.
Yeah.
Right. So you actually changed your portfolio, but you just did that recently. But you've been feeling bearish in general. So just because everyone says they're bearish, feels like they're bearish, doesn't mean they fully changed or fully capitulated. So I think that's my argument. Because like we've been talking about this a lot in the Discord. Is like, well, everyone's in this trade of short, but like that doesn't mean they're fully positioned because equities as a percentage of investors' net worth is coming off all-time highs, and it was higher than it was when we had a pre-dot-com bust.
Wow.
So equities as a percentage of basically that pie chart of what is your portfolio was at all-time highs. So basically we have some room for more portfolio allocation changes.
Totally.
Even though it feels like everyone's bearish, even on your favorite podcast. Like, and I think I'm an example of this, right? Like JP Morgan is managing my portfolio.
Long only?
I mean, God bless the private bank. They provide some good services, but like, let's be honest, they're like kind of like Mr. Market when it comes to, managing your money over a lifetime. It's not like they're going to get active in certain trades. They've repositioned a little bit from what I can see, but like I need to hedge against that risk. But I haven't gone full capitulation where I called him like, I don't care what Marco, whatever the guy's name is at JP Morgan, who's like the head strategist or
Marco.
whatever. Yeah. Like, I don't care what he says. Like, I'm telling you to do this. I haven't done that yet. I just put a chunk in a separate TD Ameritrade account that they don't know about.
That you do on your own.
Hedging against their strategies. So I guess that's an example, right?
Yeah. And I think I want to sort of like devil's advocate myself even, where it's like everybody wants to sell any pump that comes out anyway. Like, there's an old adage that says like hedged markets don't collapse, right? Right. But this is kind of the inverse. It's like when you're in an environment where everybody wants like the ability to sell on any pump, like you're never going to see like a huge like spike, like this like bear market rally that I'm really afraid of.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily see like a 40% decline from here, but like, another 15, 20% seems
so like
seems
S&P's at 3,800 ish.
Yeah, highs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it probably goes to 3,400 easy. I could see 3,200. That would be like.
If Stephen was here, he'd say 2,800 or lower.
Yeah, and I could even see that. But like, I think pre-COVID highs were about 3,200 ish, if I'm remembering correctly. Could easily see a retracement down to there, perhaps even further. Right?
And I think the market is like, well, if that happens, it'll break and the Fed will pivot. But if they still see, rates of growth or just the market better than it was pre-COVID, they may feel comfortable to just keep going away. Like they don't want mass unemployment. They don't want that.
And I was looking at some data like on how far the S&P retraced on actual recessions, and like they got ugly, like down 45%, down 50%, and like we're down like 20% now. So like could go further.
And I'm trying to remember, but in 2007 we had a leg down, but like 2008 was the recession. Like 2007 the market went down at quite a bit, but then 2008 we were like, oh, we have a recession. So like we could see the 2022 like multiple compression, and then like the 2023 recession as like a a corollary, I guess.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who do you guys recommend to follow to get educated in general? I mean, like Eric, you made one point about how like macro has become God in so many ways, and like you even have had to turn your attention to it for the first time.
It's something I have ignored for the longest time.
Yeah, and it's been a discussion in our community, and I even for the first time am turning my attention and antenna on toward these things for the first time. So you guys mentioned Mr. Darius Dale, double D. I'm curious if there's others that are like at that level that so far you guys have like sussed out.
You like Macro Alf on Twitter?
I love
I think that's
Macro Alf.
his Twitter handle.
Yeah, at Macro Alf. This guy used to run like a $20 billion portfolio, macro only. Like, so it's funny you mentioned it because like, you know, we move in cycles. There's credit cycles, but like investment strategies also move in cycles. So like, there's going to be like a time where like value investing is winning.
Yeah,
So we,
like the equities guy is like
we just came off like a big growth phase where like growth investing was everything, and now it's like going to this macro, and like I think all these macro investors are kind of like it's my time.
Yeah, for sure.
So like there are some great. I think like Jam Croissant. That's a good one. I mean, he's more like looking at dealer positioning and sort of like the flow of funds, but that's also very good.
If you came from the Bankless podcast, they've had Jim Bianco and Lynn Alden.
Yep.
I think Jim Bianco, you know, specifically called higher inflation than the market was expecting, and he's been calling for like last 6 to 9 months that the Fed is going to have to tighten rates higher than the market expects. So, and he also understands crypto markets as well. So that's one that you know the audience is probably familiar with that I give a vote for.
Yep.
Jim Bianco's pretty on point. But yeah, I think we should probably compile. And I think at one point, maybe Steven shared like a macro list in the Discord. We could probably reshare that because we all kind of use the same
I just know
list.
people love resources, whether it be favorite books or favorite macro influencers.
And we're in this like weird position in the market where like even some big boys, Dalio, Druckenmiller, like they haven't seen this before.
Absolutely.
And they're even confused. So like I've been like accelerating how much information I'm trying to like take in on a given week to try to get various takes and perspectives. And you know, the people who come with the hard data seem the most sound.
So I like this idea of synthesizing, right? Like you can synthesize your information sources, but I want to synthesize the play.
Okay, so let's talk about
the play.
All right, I like this. So inflation now, potential. We talked about this before we started recording, like deflation afterwards.
When inflation peaks and starts moving downward.
Right, because we even though it's sticky, inflation, it may go from 9 to 7 to 6 to 5.
And the truth is, your investment positioning should change in these different environments. Like in an inflationary environment, it should be defensive, but using X, Y, and Z assets, and those assets, asset makeup should change when we go into
I would love to know what
environment.
you guys
but they don't change that much compared to like
it's still very defensive.
the allocation should change, shouldn't it?
yeah, but like not that much.
Just to be clear, in both of those environments, you need to be defensively positioned. It's just like what specific ones work better than others.
Yeah, so I wrote down a few. Like in inflation, you want to short high beta stocks, which you mentioned that's what you're doing.
But I'm late to that game, obviously.
Yeah, but you've also been long dollar. UUP is the index.
We had a whole podcast on it. You guys, where are you at?
Diversified real estate, consumer staples. Those are kind of like defensive names. High dividend stocks are kind of like also in that play. I think the only difference that I've noticed between inflation and deflation from what I've researched, because like we've lived in a low inflation period, maybe you call it deflationary, but we haven't seen like drastic deflation. And I don't remember a time when goods just like really went down in price, but actually owning bonds can actually play well in that market.
That's one that
Finally.
So that's finally that's one that I'm like really thinking about quite a bit because like I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around that. So like the TLT is an ETF that
Can I?
The TLT is like a very popular ETF that
it's a 20-year.
It owns the 20-year treasury. I'm worried about that one because like the idea behind owning the TLT is that when you hit a recession, you're going to get like a flattening of the yield curve. So the TLT would actually go higher as the long yield comes down. I agree with that. My fear is that the Fed is really going to make sure that they don't lose the bond market as well. And like, I think that trade scares me. I'm trying to wrap my head around how low those yield, like how inverted can that go?
Right.
Because we're already inverted, you know, like they're going to continue raising the short end.
Yep.
That would invert the long end even further just at these levels. Like, I don't think it gets like dramatically, the TLT doesn't go up as much as people are thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of like makes me sad to say that I would, put bonds in my portfolio. I don't know why. It just doesn't sound very exciting. Most of us listening and talking here are used to owning some pretty.
Like, I would rather
we're
own-
in the younger, let's call it the younger bracket. So
Yeah, but even for like boomer allocate, I would rather take dollars. Like
just cash.
not even just cash, but like UUP, DXY. I would rather take cash against other fiat currencies.
Right.
It's still a boomer trade, but like that one, I see nothing but sort of like upside.
It's interesting because, just like we've seen in DeFi, how the DeFi yields some of them have gone below the 10-year treasury.
Gnarly.
And a lot of the, the S&P, the percentage of S&P stocks that have dividends greater than 10-year treasury is at all-time low. So like, for a while we were saying, well, there is the best alternative is like, U.S. equities, but that's not necessarily the case anymore where, bonds might actually have a decent yield, which sounds weird. I haven't experienced that.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Anything else to go on
do you have
markets?
anything on
I
your
mean,
notes?
that also like answer like I guess like how to position in inflation. I think also heavy cash.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
I think there was maybe a little more I'm personally curious about around the allocation.
okay. So I want to talk about that. Most people, particularly like most people are coming from the crypto world, are like heavy long. Like they're like long oriented. So what I want to say is like hedge that. And there's many ways to do it. You can hedge by going long lower beta stuff, meaning like you can go long bonds or whatever. I prefer shorting. Like shorting is a way to hedge your long exposure. I would rather short shitty things than go long mediocre things.
So if you need spicy level, if you need like 8 out of 10 spice, instead of on the bonds, go short the risk assets.
That's how I feel. And like, a lot of these macro analysts are like long oriented as well. I think most human beings are just like, what do you buy? Instead of being like, what should I sell? Like I want to sell sort of all risky shit.
Right.
Like whether or not we're in an inflationary environment or a deflationary environment, the bottom line is liquidity is going away,
Right.
and you don't want to be investing.
I'll tell you this: I don't feel comfortable shorting the crypto markets right now. So like those are the the ones further out on the risk curve.
Hold on, I gotta.
Is that
I gotta
because
close
of
everything.
that? Is that for that reason?
I just I think the risk return
unpredictability.
Yeah, like okay, so what we go from 1100 ETH to 900 ETH, 800 ETH, but like maybe only briefly. Maybe it just shows up as a wick. When we look back in this period, it shows up as a wick on the weekly candle. It's like it was there for 3 days. I
Okay,
don't know.
so this is an environment, and like maybe advanced, but probably not. Like playing the options game now makes all the sense in the world to me. You go long calls and puts because implied volatility is very low for the actual environment we're in. Even the VIX is low. I'd like long the VIX here.
Right.
Like VIX is 26. Like it's gonna go to like 40.
Right.
Like when shit hits the fan. So I think you can like play volatility, go long puts and calls on things like ETH, and you probably win both ways.
Yeah, I think that's a smarter way of thinking about it. All right. You want to transition to
the end
what
of
the
the
hell
world.
is happening in the world?
The end of the world.
Oh God.
I have a very strong stance on all of that, more philosophically.
Yeah, that's what you're here for. We want to hear yours.
Well, no. So what we're diving into is the chaos in the world, and actually just like big shout out to our community as a whole for helping us actually, we kind of put the word out sometimes, occasionally here and there, like what's on your guys' mind. And when they speak up and they tell us what they're thinking, it helps us get a sense of the barometer of the
last 2
room.
weeks have been crazy.
It's been
we
crazy.
saw
Let's talk about what we've seen in
Boris
the world.
Johnson.
Yeah, can you
Boris
give, like-
Johnson resigned.
Yeah, the prime minister of fucking United
UK.
Kingdom.
It resigns. We had the former prime minister of Japan get assassinated. We've had some kind of run on Chinese banks, which still seem unclear, like why that's
Right.
happening. At least I haven't dug deep into enough. Sri Lanka just failed as a country. The
Sri Lanka collapsed.
is defunct, and the Germans are running out of gas and oil. Like one of the like major developed nations is now going to be like, please don't use as much energy. So like all of these things happening last few weeks just gives you the feel that like what the fuck is going on?
Sri Lanka, they asked the citizens to like well, first of all, they like just turned off power for like 14 hours a day.
They had already
done that before the collapse. Like it's so bad.
14 hours.
Yeah, and just like telling people like just nothing, like no power.
God damn. I don't know. How do you guys react to that? Like when you see these like isolated cases that appear to be interconnected through macro, which is again back to our previous point, why we're all paying so much attention to macro. These feel like isolated individual cases of chaos. Like the fucking fact that like somebody's getting assassinated that led
in a country with very little gun violence.
Oh yeah, very little.
So I have like an educated.
Didn't he like make the gun?
He like made the gun with
Oh,
like two pipes and so I have like an educated take, and then I have like my tinfoil.
Give me your degen take.
Well, let me just start with the educated one. The educated one is like Ray Dalio wrote a book on this. He wrote a book called The Changing World Order, and what
you revisited that recently.
Yeah,
right?
I'm like maybe 3/4 of the way through that, and what he's talking about is how a lot of the Western world right now is past the peak of their power. Right, and we're entering like stage 5, what he calls it is, or we're actually in stage 5, which is right before stage 6. Stage 6 is revolt, and civil war,
which you've talked about for years, in our own
And
personal
dollar
discourse.
milkshake theory, promotes that like the sign that it's playing out is that you see revolt and civil unrest.
Right, and we're also seeing revolt and civil unrest. So I think like Dalio is describing this already. He's saying like this is
I just
to be
don't want to
expected.
see it in America because it'll be the most bloody and violent here than anywhere else.
It doesn't have to be, but
I would love that.
But it can. Sure. And I think that it's like the smart take is like, well, this is to be expected. Things move in long-term cycles. This is nearing the end of a long-term cycle. My tinfoil hat is thinking like, this must be freaking orchestrated by China. And my thought, like, let's like isolate Sri. Like, first of all, I'm a believer that like the big game here is China trying to become the world power.
You're playing 4D chess right now in your mind.
I like that you're coming to my side of the table. Steven's not here to.
No. I love this.
Not even playing 4D chess. I'm playing like.
But you're
drool
imagining
on myself. Like I'm playing drool on myself. Checkers. The tinfoil hat says China is the big game. Is China becoming the world power, and they're going to do what it takes to get there. And I think them going zero COVID is like part of this. Like it's like choking supply chains. I think they're seeing the turmoil here in the United States, and they're seeing like, oh, here's an opportunity, and they're going to try to exacerbate the turmoil here in the United States. Part of one way they're going to do that is by like choking supply chains more. And I think where this really ends, and I can even give more examples, but where this ends is like China taking over Taiwan and us not doing anything about it or doing something about it and starting World War III. But if we don't do anything about it, the issue with that is, I mean, most of the semiconductors come from Taiwan. They're going to control the compute power of the world. That's an issue.
Yeah.
But like, let me back up before we go that route. Another little feather in this little tinfoil cap I'm wearing is like within Sri Lanka alone, they were already like pretty defunct to begin with. I think 95% of their tax revenue was going to debt service. So they didn't have any money. Like they didn't really have any leeway to do anything.
That's
but they
terrible.
were still building ports. They were building bridges. And guess who was building that? China.
Yeah.
China was building that. And like,
So they had him by the balls the whole time.
and the idea behind that tinfoil is that China wants another like port for their navy. And like, that's a good port. It'd be like off India.
And don't they have a pretty weak navy?
Yeah, I don't think they have much of a navy, but like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be kind of nice to have like
To have a
a
little-
I mean, it's
station
part of their
right there?
Belt and Road Initiative, right? Like same thing, like a little economic imperialism, not like physical imperialism,
Yes.
but economic.
Okay, so they build this port and they're just like, yeah, don't worry about the deal terms necessarily. You know, like, yeah, sure, pay us when you can. And it's like, who ever lends like that? Nobody ever lends without like assessing, you know, like creditor, you know, availability to pay back.
Yeah.
Well, I think the idea is that they don't pay back, and then you're like, well,
Exactly.
now we own this port, and it's going to be a military port.
Thank
and
you.
We
That's
also
what I'm
happen to
saying.
like
Sorry,
dredge
but wasn't
the
that
depth.
America's MO for a long time?
Yeah, we used to read books on what was it?
The economic hitman.
Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Confessions of
We
an
in our
Economic
college liberal stages.
we used to be conspiracy theorists.
Well, here
Straight up.
I've reached that point.
Yeah, man. Welcome to the club.
So I'm just seeing all these like little games happen, and the other thing that I'm noticing, right? So like Sri Lanka defaulted on $4 billion. That's like such a small amount, really. In like
Wait, I'm in shock right now. Do you know what the population of Sri Lanka is?
no,
Guess.
I don't know.
Guess.
I don't even like. I don't know.
probably
Just-
probably India-esque. Like it's probably densely
80
populated.
million.
No, more.
This is an island, guys, off the coast of India. What do you think? They just pack it up to
Yeah,
the sky?
look-
Well,
India.
Indonesia.
I
does.
was hoping you guys would say like, what, 2 million?
What is
it's
it?
22 million.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. It's still a lot.
I don't know. I think of Indonesia. It's
Yeah,
like
same.
Indonesia is a different deal.
Oh, huge. Okay, sorry. So it's not that big, but I was
That's a big nation.
But $4 billion to collapse, I was thinking like, shit, Chamath could just bail him out right now by himself. So $4 billion, and then the country's just collapsed. Like, come on, that's what I was thinking. But then I was also thinking like, well, that works right in the hand. Works right in the hand of the big game.
I
Right.
like tinfoil, Eric.
All right.
This
So
is
before
great.
we get into full tinfoil,
Yeah.
like I generally look at all these things happening, and I think the bad road to go down is to just get the feel that like everything's collapsing. The world is ending. Everything's going wrong. Like I don't think that's the right path, because like as you say, the world is ending. You could also say that like
The right path of thinking or the right path of accuracy of what is happening?
well, like you could also say with accuracy that the world's never been in a better place. Like we're launching
Steven
rockets. Like yeah, you could make the counter argument for like on several different measures, like even just like general living standards and like even the poorest of the poor.
Undeniably true.
Right. So you can make that case. So I
Undeniably
don't
true.
think, mashing all these events together and just saying the world is ending or the world is amazing is the best way to go. Like we've often talked about like a framework on a country by country basis.
So purple. I want to keep going on
I-
tinfoil.
No,
Could
I'm going to go
not-
purple and then we'll go.
Go purple.
Let me
but
come
I
back.
just have to say this is refreshing because most people just want to like pack it all together.
And it doesn't feel good when you say like, because you can get trapped and be like, the world is going down this route. But like, I think it's better to take a country by country basis. And like, we've often used the framework, geography, number one, when it comes to evaluating countries and where they sit in the geopolitical area, like geography, number one, demographics, number two, let's put like resources, number three, and like how can you produce food and energy, which also kind of ties back to geography, your military, how strong is your military? And like that also relates to geography, probably your financial strength in the world. And I think that framework is a better way to evaluate all of these scenarios, right? Like if you look at Sri Lanka, they owe debt most likely in dollars, and like they suffer from like the fact that the United States has a very strong, financial place in the world, and they have to owe money in dollars, and they're probably trapped. You look at Germany; they haven't necessarily secured the resources they need for their country, basic energy, right? So like I think when you map it out on a framework, you can see that each
So
of these.
funny. Trump called that one.
Yeah, and to his credit, he called
To
it
his credit.
in front of the EU.
Oh yeah.
And actually, I think a speech
I've
in the
watched that
UN.
video.
There's a
In
video.
front of NATO, I think.
Yeah, NATO. No, it was in the UN.
UN.
He gave a speech and he basically said like, the Germans are
Buck
setting
up.
themselves up for like being held hostage by the Russians, and then the video pans to the German delegation, and they're laughing.
I don't care what you think, but you don't want to negotiate with that guy.
Right. So anyway, he was definitely right on that.
On that one,
I don't think he used the right tactics or the right strategy.
Totally.
But like he was certainly right on that.
Perceptive.
And
It was
I think
perceptive.
people should give him more credit on that in that regard for sure. So anyway, I think it just makes sense to kind of use the framework and see that each country is in its own, different framework on where they sit on those factors.
All right, we'll put this in your framework. Tinfoil back on.
Stick this in your framework.
Yeah, and smoke it. Okay. You said Sri Lanka, population 22 mil. I just looked up.
I'm blown away by that.
Okay. It's 22 million. It's neither small nor large. It's 22 million. Like Ukraine is 44 million.
Right.
Not that big. We just shipped another 1.4 billion to them on last Tuesday.
What's the total at, by the way?
Really?
Yeah, we shipped another 1.4 billion as if 1.4 billion is nothing. And
Can I just show you the size of this country? Like, look at it relative to India.
It's a dot.
It's a dot.
It's in a little island. But yeah, okay, so it's half the size of Ukraine. How much money are we giving to Ukraine? And my question is it's like, it's interesting how the United States is going to pick and choose these humanitarian issues that we're going to get behind. Why? Tinfoil's on. It's like there's a bigger game at play. Why does that one matter so much that we're going to continue dishing out cash versus this one? It's like, let it fail.
Well, I think like we can call them elites or just like the political class tends to frame the argument in terms of authoritarian versus democracy. Like, which is going to win? Are authoritarians going to win, or is democracy going to win? And can we preserve our liberal world order where like liberty, not like democratic liberal, but just like, having liberty over you as a human being and your rights, does it exist? And I think they put it in that framework, and it feels, to like a political elite, it feels like an existential crisis when a democratic country like Ukraine gets invaded, and you also allow an authoritarian regime to come in and like, well, that sets an example and a precedent, and that could probably lead into our Taiwan discussion at some point.
That's what I want to. Now I want to get to World War III.
Click it. Click it.
Dink. World War III. So,
what does that take to start? What's the shot heard around the world
Taiwan.
of World War III?
Taiwan, I think.
Really?
Well,
that's the one.
Let's talk about it. And here's how.
I think a lot of people are going to be apprehensive.
Well, here's how I feel it playing out. Let me go back to.
It's an expected shot versus the shot that was not expected.
Let me go back
for World War
like a couple
I,
steps
for example.
back, like in a Ray Dalio framework. He says that like when Western nations that have had like incredible prosperity for a long time get to a point where they're heavily indebted, the tax income does not like make up for the expenditures that they need to continue to run the government. You get this like infighting, and you see that happening now. He calls it the internal order, and he says when the internal order gets disrupted, what you often find is that you see polarization, and you see these guys, the populist political figures emerge on either side, the left and the right, and you're seeing that today, right?
Trump, Boris Johnson,
and then like you'll see Sanders
Bernie.
and Elizabeth Warren, et cetera.
Yeah.
Like, and these are all speak to sort of this like stage 5 environment, and that's what we're in. I think like where I want to take this is you get populism rising, you get infighting. I think China likes to see like, tinfoil's back on. China likes to see.
Love the illustration.
Yeah.
China likes to see the infighting, and they want to go as far as they can to the point where America is about to go civil war mode, and then they'll be like, "Oh, just walk into Taiwan, take it." Because I think if they were to go now,
don't you feel like we're quite a ways away from that? Or do you
I got some
actually feel like
timelines for you.
Yeah, give me a timeline.
All right, so Xi Jinping has this thing called the Great China Rejuvenation, and it's a plan to reach the full rejuvenation by I think 2049. Which represents the 100-year anniversary of the CPP being formed.
So it's completely arbitrary out of his ass. Okay.
Yeah, but that's his plan. It's important to know what his plan is. It's also important to know that he probably won't be alive by 2049. So, okay, maybe don't work backwards from there. What other date could we work backwards from? 2027 is also an important date. It's the 100-year anniversary of the People's Liberation Army, of it being formed. And part of that includes a lot of capability increasements by 2027. And if you look at them, they're primarily centered around, can we take over Taiwan? So if you kind of work backwards from that, you might be right that it could be within the next 5 years and waiting for a particular.
Don't feed my tinfoil. Like, let that die.
And part of that rejuvenation is explicitly going back to like historical territories, which includes Taiwan. So, Can
I ask you a question? So you talked about the time frame. I like that, and I think those dates probably do have significance. My question is like I came with such a middle curve take on Taiwan, just as a standalone, like, okay, so they're going to take it over in semiconductors. Like, okay, fine. Like, what are the other ramifications? Like, if they do take Taiwan, like, how important is that?
Yeah, I think there's some other context we could probably add in, but I want to get to some of those before we go into that. Like, I think it's important to understand like the Taiwanese people, like how do they feel about this? Because I think it sets the framework for like where could this go and what should the U.S.'s strategy be.
Very good, and I want to just to preface that, like, I think it's important to note that like a lot of Ukrainians. Like when I was in San Francisco, I was like talking to a Ukrainian woman when Crimea was taken, and she's like, no, I grew up there. Like, we think of ourselves as Russian,
right?
So that takeover was like good, you know, like for the locals. Like, they were like, okay, cool, yeah. And I thought of it as this atrocity because that's sort of what I was being fed.
But you could also think of it as an atrocity as like someone in the Russian army taking over your brothers, your genetic brothers. Like, I think that's how that it's thought of. Taiwan is I think a little different. Like there's a rise in Taiwanese identity where I think Ukrainians have that, but I think in particular like Taiwanese have that, and I think they understand that they're on different political trajectories than China, and there's not necessarily like a push for unification. You know, I don't think they want to go back to China, because if you look at Hong Kong, you know, Hong Kong is like a perfect example of what Taiwan's future might look like, right? This separate area under a separate administration, but, you know, you see that China took it back from UK and said, we'll keep it separate. But slowly over time, their rights are diminished and increasingly diminished.
Right, it's being assimilated.
Right, it's being assimilated. So I don't think there's this push for any kind of unification. And then there's not necessarily a push for independence, because what does that mean? Does that mean going to war? So there's like this like of the status quo. They really want the status quo. And so you're
in and of itself is so complex, what you just said. Like to live in that state of mind, like that's not just like a Passover comment. That's really difficult, but go ahead.
Yeah. And so I think, what was your question, Eric, about like what beyond the semiconductors?
Yeah, like what are the ramifications if China takes over Taiwan? Like how devastating
really,
is that? Because like if it is devastating, then the world will step in, and then you'll see like these.
To the previous point to that, it is a trigger for an escalation,
right? And I
that
think,
requires multiple continents to get involved.
And I think you're already seeing, like Nick brought this up in our chat or maybe somewhere like in person. He was saying like I already see the factions becoming clear, where you have like the Axis powers of China, North Korea, Russia, Iran versus, you know, the Western world.
Yeah, we call it the team players. I think that's a, you know, new axis of evil over there. And I think the question to your point is, will Japan and will Australia and will South Korea join the fight? So, you know, I guess a little context, like the U.S. has this, protocol of like strategic ambiguity when it comes to Taiwan. And the initial idea was, I think this is like in the late 70s, early 80s, where we're not going to say what we're going to do. And that does two things. It keeps China at bay because it's supposed to deter them, because we might step in.
What if?
But it also keeps Taiwan from like egging on their like, you know, older parent and poking the bear and getting too far for their britches. And
because we might not step in.
We might not step in. So it keeps both. It kind of deters people to like,
I like it.
Stay
it's a good position.
In the status quo. But you could argue that like that could be irrelevant now, because now China is becoming less risk adverse. You see with Hong Kong is like, again, a great example.
Sure.
Like them kind of issuing economic like coercion over Australia. Like they are showing in like foreign relations that they are not as risk adverse as they used to. And they're increasing military capabilities. So you could argue that that stance is not so much relevant anymore. And they're clearly signaling this. I mean, they're running consistent sorties, you know, like military aircraft going into their Taiwan's like air identification zone. I don't know what the technical term is. And I think they're doing it for multiple reasons. Like they want to, one, practice. Two, they want to desensitize the U.S. and Taiwan from, this is just another one of those like practice runs where at night they just fly 40 planes, and then when it comes to close to the coast, they just veer off. And they also like are wasting Taiwanese resources because every time they fly one of those planes, Taiwan has to like assemble like a scramble team, and they're just using their resources and depleting them over time. And it's also like a political signal. Like anytime we sell military to them, they might run one of those to say like, we're not deterred.
So let me
by your
try to
by
get
your action.
Let me try to like extract a take
Please.
out of
Yeah.
you.
That was real good.
If like, let me just preface it. I think the political barometer and really the internal order barometer really matters to the answer of this. Like if we're so worried and so concerned about our own shit here locally, it's less likely we would intervene in something like Taiwan. I think that's very clear, right? Like we're seeing it now, like in Ukraine. Like if this was the 90s, we probably would have like put boots on the ground, right? Like the fact that it's now, we're already sort of like compromised financially, and we've already like fought all these wars that have led to zero outcome. Like we are just exhausted fighting like other people's wars, right? If this continues, we're going to be less and less likely to intervene in Taiwan. My question to you is, will we, and like, does it even matter? Like,
Yes,
okay, so let's go.
we will.
Yeah,
Like,
talk about it.
So this president,
You think we will?
yeah. So we kind of shifted. I don't know if you saw it. It got Biden made a comment that says we will intervene.
Yeah, no.
And that was like what I think like a month or two
Yeah.
ago.
And then he like walked that back.
yeah, but I don't. For as much bumbling as he does, like I don't.
He
like,
bumbles?
He bumbles.
I'm just kidding.
He gets me every time. Every time I laugh, each new bumble, it just gets me
So-
every time, even though it's
We should
expected.
talk about that.
Okay, so
sometime.
Yeah.
I actually want to bring that up right now, just because we're talking about the bumbling.
I'm kind of.
I got
feeling
another
like we should talk
tin
about
foil
that.
on.
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so like Boris Johnson was forced out.
Yeah.
Like he resigned, but he was like,
Why is nobody talking about leaving this guy, and everybody wanted to leave Trump?
I can already see that like
He's completely inept.
the early stages of Biden being forced out is already happening. In my opinion, tinfoil.
Of
course.
Tinfoil. Like the fact that Gavin Newsom's running ads in Florida tells me that the Democratic Party is like on board with forcing Biden out. They're gonna like frame it as like health reasons. This guy's like, you know, he's got a heart palpitations or something, where they replace him because he's just, I mean, he is bumbling. He's bumbling, but like,
Base case is they replace him with another candidate, for sure.
well, Newsom, like I think Newsom's been appointed. Like the Newsom's like they tapped him. Like, hey, we're gonna start running ads in Florida, and like we'll see how you do.
Yeah.
Because like they're gonna do the same thing to Biden they're doing to Boris.
Because it would just be an absolute demolition.
I mean, the next 2 years is going to be rough.
Well,
I mean,
like
he's
his
deteriorating.
will
approval
be very
ratings
rough.
are awful. Like,
Well, just the election alone, like he has no chance.
there's no like literally, it's going to be a huge red wave regardless. But like,
Right.
they got to do something. I just see this happening as a tinfoil
Hey, the
thing.
guy that failed America to step up. I mean, excuse me, California.
It's so wild that they're going to go
Guy
to
that failed
Newsom. Like,
California.
Newsom has no fans here. Like we
No.
live in California and nobody likes him.
He doesn't. There was like
So that's
literally.
that's their best
Faced a
alternative.
recall.
That's our
Faced a
best
recall.
alternative
Referendum.
for a Democrat.
Take
So until
us
2024,
back,
if they invade Taiwan, we will. Like he will do this. Like Biden, I think, voted for the Taiwanese Relations Act. Like he criticized President Bush for being too ambiguous about the response. I think he's always in his career said we need to be very clear that we will intervene because being ambiguous is not enough a deterrent
So
for
it's
like a
only-
growing and rising China.
Okay.
So if it happens in the next 2 years, it will happen. I think
can't see
undoubtedly.
it not happening
True-
in the next 2 years.
and I'm saying just specifically like troops on the ground.
okay, so let's talk
Yeah.
about your timeline, 2027. You know, we don't know who's president at that point.
Right.
Yeah, it maybe makes sense to kind of if there was an America First candidate maybe coming into in 2024 for them to
And
to
that sort
take
of
action.
seems to be the trajectory we're on, right? Because like we have this infighting, we're gonna move towards like America first.
That's the Peter Zeihan take in general, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like I think China could wait it out for at least another 5 years and then go. And you know, China's playing long-term games.
And anyway, you could make the argument that it is better to have strategic clarity. Like we will intervene because for your point, like maybe you know the case for intervening is like you said. Number one, 70% of all of our specialized like semiconductors come from
70%
Taiwan.
of the global.
No, it's not. It's like 90%
90%
of
of
global,
global
and
production.
70% of U.S. semiconductors come from Taiwan.
You recognize that semiconductors are in everything. They're in our fucking fridges and like our phones, laptops, like TVs, like every single thing.
I don't think most people know that.
And also, if you don't control that semiconductor distribution, you cannot sanction Russia and China, because like we do withhold exports. We do coordinate to say like you shouldn't export these semiconductors to Russia. I mean, they found like chips from microwaves in certain weapon systems. Like they're using deteriorated technology, and I think that's one of the cases for it. Another case is
just to understand, you're saying even if Biden is not in office, regardless.
I'm just saying
here's
here's the case for people who say we should intervene.
Not that we should, it will.
Oh, I think in 2024 we will. It's argued that no matter who the president is, that we will intervene.
We will. Interesting.
Because like you lose control of distribution of those chips.
Yeah.
Also,
that's a big chunk.
If China takes over Taiwan militarily and geographically, they can threaten Japan, Philippines, and we have much harder in place security guarantees with those countries. So like, are you just pushing? If you don't, fight that militarily, are you just pushing back an inevitable aggression if they want to do that? And so if you look at like a post China taking over Taiwan world, you see a lot of allies like Japan, South Korea,
I think even be up to them.
Even Australia moving more
I don't see
economically.
The US getting involved at that point.
I don't think that should be the case. I like strategic ambiguity, and then in the background telling Taiwan, we're not coming to save you.
But because if we go into direct military conflict with China, that has ramifications. Matt, I mean, that's World War III, I think.
Definitely.
Right. And I think China is learning something from Ukraine, that one thing that has kept us back is the idea of like nuclear war, right? That is like the red line that says, well, if we get in direct confrontation with Russia, well, obviously the next step is nuclear weapons, right? And so China is currently building up their nuclear capabilities because it's kind of this thing like, if they have that ability, then it may just stop us short. Even though they don't have to use them, it stops both parties short getting in direct confrontation with each other. So like, I think we see that as a possibility. China sees that as a possibility. Like, well, let's quickly develop this part of us so that chip is on the chessboard. Yeah, I mean, I guess like other cases for defending them are like an attack on democracy worldwide. I don't know. I don't necessarily buy it. Like if China takes over Taiwan and we lose some semiconductor production, like all the goods that we face will inflate and there will be shortages, like mass shortages. But what happens if we get in direct war with China? Like you want to see what happens in a supply chain shortage in that case? Like they have an outbreak of a flu and we feel it here. Like imagine like direct confrontation and the economic like impacts of a middle class person in America. I don't think Americans want to sign up for that.
Go ahead.
Like three things are like in my brain at the same time. But
no, I mean I have one that's like a complete derailment of this conversation. Okay. So if you want to go, you can.
Well, it's just like if you're in the position of power and you foresee these things, the question I have is like, why would a person be sitting back and waiting for these events to occur instead of creating what I think seems to be like the new MO for Earth as a whole, which is to like withdraw, isolationism, bringing resources home. Like why wait to rely on Taiwan for a 70% semiconductor like resource availability when we could begin to move in the direction
of
a
great point. We have a CHIPS Act.
We're already moving that way anyway, by the way.
On the table right now. And Mitch McConnell says he will hold it up if, I believe it's the Democrats, like try to rope in more, I don't know, like COVID legislation. I don't know. They're trying to like batch in some other stuff. But there is a CHIPS regulation that would basically use government money to subsidize like an Intel semiconductor plant in the U.S. And the issue with that is like, I think semiconductor, just like we talked about oil refineries, they take a lot of money and it's a many-year development to catch up. I think we're very far behind in like the technological capabilities that Taiwan Semiconductor has.
Right, and you said that these facilities are highly specialized. It's not like you can just like fabricate one overnight and let it just like operate at TSMC's level. Like,
yeah, there's another podcast I listen to called Intelligence Matters, and there's a reason they've had multiple podcasts on that has featured discussions on semiconductor technology. Like, why is an intelligence podcast discussing this? Because they see it as like one of our main vulnerabilities, that just because you want to develop and you have a bunch of money doesn't necessarily mean you'll catch up to current stage technology of what's being produced in those plants in Taiwan. But the point is, like Armand's saying, we have to start, and we can't like let this legislation stall. We have to push it forward, and we have to have that capability. If it is 2027, well, we got 5 years to try to catch up. And so, I think that's like the number one thing you could do, because I think for most Americans, if you take off the semiconductor shortage, like there really is no, for the average American and what impacts their day-to-day life, I don't think they're going to be, there to want to protect the Taiwanese people from invasion outside of that.
So I got another take, and I wish Armand was here for this one, because it's like I got a good pivot, and it's actually probably better for like a whole podcast segment. But it's this idea, I can't remember if it was Dalio or if it was 42 Mac or somebody I was listening to recently mentioned that what's good on a net basis, like something can be good on a net basis for a time, but it can leave you vulnerabilities in ways that you don't imagine, right? So like setting up your like global trade system that like has this like very important fulcrum that's vulnerable can like just really leave you at a really disadvantaged place. And the example that I was actually looking at was like how like automating the workforce is actually like net positive, but it leads to like a lot of displacement of people that are like not participating in sort of like global prosperity or like even US prosperity. So you can look at things on a net basis, but that doesn't actually work all the time, right? So
well, the best case is like just globalization in general, probably raised like, I don't know, 1 billion people out of like poverty, right? Like India, China, but there was a subsection of the US economy which did not participate in the growth. In fact, suffered.
Manufacturing here in the US just got crushed, and like that whole like Rust Belt is just decimated.
Right. I mean, at some point we should probably like dive into like the Gini coefficient. It's a pretty interesting way of like measuring like political risk, I guess, because it measures like income disparities among people. The higher in the Gini coefficient, like the more disparities. And the U.S. is high on them, and I think
very
like
high.
Yeah. So that gave a rise to populism, right? Because like they consider themselves the silent majority.
Exactly.
And that gave a rise to a populist leader like Trump.
I'm glad you're back, because I really wanted to hear your take on this, where it's like you have these initiatives that can be good, right? Mm-hmm. They can be like net positive, but if they're leaving a swath of people behind, or like leaving them completely disadvantaged, like even as we are like relying totally on Taiwan for semiconductor production, like there's huge risk with that strategy. Huge. And I do want to do a whole nother podcast segment on just like what happens with labor with all of these like net positive initiatives. Net positive initiative like globalizing, robotization or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what happens to the people that like just have nothing to do now?
So I'm super curious, Eric. Like, just to kind of like bring the segment with like some spice, like, do you think we're going to have a World War III? And if so, what's it going to look like?
I think almost certainly, of course.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, without putting a time frame on it, yeah, of course.
Well, I guess a better way to ask that question is not, I think the answer to my initial question is you see it as an inevitability that we will have a third world war. But do you, which is funny because it depended on technology in the first place for it to be able to be possible. But like, do you see that as something that we would see in the next decade? Let's just say.
I look at it in like two silos. You have like the internal order struggle, and that's like what we're talking about, the rise of populism. Yep. And how we're like within the United States, there's this perhaps like civil war brewing. And I think,
Do you see that as like a general catalyst for the rest of the world,
well, I think it would like,
or is like significant of
I think
unrest that exists within the world at large?
yeah, I think a lot of the Western nations are in the same stage that we are.
Correct. Yeah, especially in Europe.
Yeah, right. And they're maybe even further along.
They are.
Than we are into like stage 5 going to stage 6. But
It might be funny to watch it happen in like fucking Hungary or something, or the Netherlands.
sure.
And then we're like, I guess we're.
So there's going to be an internal order struggle that's happening alongside this global world order struggle. China trying to rise as the power, and I'm really I don't have an answer of like where it's going. I'm just like watching with intrigue to see like, okay, how do we play this? And like this is not something that I've really been excited about or like concerned with, you know, because we've had just so many years of prosperity. Right? We've grown
massively.
up. Yeah, like I think our
It's
entire
funny that
life.
in our true, like, we're really adults now. It's like all happening like at
Well,
this
this is the
stage of
first
life.
time that like the post World War II era of like 50 to 70 years of peace is starting to get interrupted. And I think like our
massively.
generation takes it for granted. Maybe our grandparents' generation like had to fight for it,
They
Right.
did.
you know, so they don't take it for granted.
You guys ready to fight for it?
Yeah, I mean that I don't think this generation is at all.
Nah, I have a gluten allergy.
Nice.
Is that
You
the
like
new
that?
like shin splints for why you don't go in the military?
Listen, U.S. Navy, you're out of luck on that one.
Yeah, like, you know, we've taken, and this goes to your point about, you know, net positive good things. Like the U.S. has created like this liberal world order, which on a net basis, I kind of like. I kind of like that there's been decades of peace, which allows for economic prosperity. Kind of like that most of the world uses the U.S. dollar. I kind of like that the internet is mostly, for the most part, like open and free and anyone can participate. I like that if I have a gay
fucking
friend,
incredible.
they're not going to get, you know, sent to jail or beheaded. Like I like
Okay,
a
so
liberal world order.
Let me ask you.
But
Okay, go ahead.
but on an individual basis, how much are you willing to sacrifice to
Right.
keep that in place? If you've grown up, that's the status quo where you never experience
You don't
directly
know
the
the
cost
cost.
that
Well,
it
let me
takes
tell
to
you,
create
the
that.
first
Exactly.
cost is actually a financial cost. So
Right.
just to be clear, we have $30 trillion of debt, and we don't make that much money here in the U.S. And people want more and more, and
That much.
Well, we're giving more and more every day. So every second, like now, and then now we're in more and more debt because the deficit is large and it's growing larger. So like, what brings that back? Well, it's taxing the three of us at a higher rate. Are we willing to sacrifice that to bring that deficit back to you know, normality? Are we willing to sacrifice ourselves to like first financially sacrifice to bring that debt level down so that our dollar can, you know, not just like disappear and our global reserve currency status doesn't disappear, our global power doesn't disappear? Like that's the first sacrifice. And then it ultimately leads to military conflict.
or just like potentially other economic disruptions like inflation, right?
Sure.
Like those are other ones. And I feel like my where I differ from the political elite is they're like, this is my fight of a lifetime. Like I'm seeing a fight between authoritarian and liberal democracy. And who is going to fight this if I don't, as the leader of the United States?
But hold on.
They don't necessarily take it down to like, well, does my primary constituent, the average American, do they want to put up with the economic cost of us doing that?
And just keep in mind, the economic cost doesn't just mean higher taxes. It does mean that. What it also means is less government payments. Like so we're going to pay more. Like the only way to bring this back in is that the government gives less out and they take in more money. So that means higher taxes and less services. There becomes a point where you get squeezed enough where you say, fuck this, I'm out. And you leave the country. And that's like where that goes. Certainly if I was Jeff Bezos or Elon, that decision would be paramount to me.
I don't think the government says we're going to pay less out. Like from a political risk, you're not going to like take entitlements down.
And doesn't the power of the dollar have a very large part to play in that decision?
Totally, but I think like the power of the dollar is deteriorating on a dollar basis for sure. That's what inflation
sure.
is. Relative to other fiat currencies, it's getting stronger and stronger. but
which maintains position.
It maintains its position. We're gonna if we want to continue the path we're on, that means printing more money because the government has a choice. Either you're gonna raise
Create more
taxes
credit.
and provide less services, or you're gonna print more money. They're gonna choose print more money. So the dollar is gonna weaken over time. Clearly.
What if we just embolden our energy industry in the U.S. Can become a net exporter of oil, refine what we need to, so we have the energy. We bring semiconductor production, domestic, and we realize that we have the best geographic placement in the whole globe, meaning that no one can really attack us.
Right.
We may not be able to defend
We've always
liberal
had that, though.
democracy.
Protected on all sides.
Yeah, we're protected everywhere with also the world's
Canada's
greatest
not
navy.
gonna
We have the
nuke us.
financial upper hand, so I don't know if it's been explored, but what's the downside of letting the rest of the world fight it out in terms of
I think that's
power
basically the
and-
play, though.
that's where
highest-
a segment of the population is saying, why don't we
yeah.
do that, and why can't we just, instead of investing in 80 bases?
Well, let me put this on you. Like I asked Eric, what do you think is the probability of the Third World War? Is it inevitable, and will it be in the short term?
I don't think it's inevitable. No,
You don't think it's
No.
inevitable?
No.
You think we could, as a species of humanity, avoid a multi-continent conflict?
No chance.
It's possible. I don't think it's probable.
It's less than 50% for you.
Yeah.
Really?
No chance. It's 100%.
What do you mean?
love his optimism.
It's 100%.
Mutual
nothing
self-destruction
100%,
is the thing.
And nothing is 0%.
Where does mutual self-destruction play in your formula? Because let's say you are China or you are Russia, and you are.
No, we don't have to assume mutual self-destruction. We
But
just
you have to, because
assume-
if you say World War III, then you bring in nuclear weapons.
No. There is no guarantee that nuclear weapons have to be used in World War III.
You can have a
I
bar
hope-
fight without taking it to guns.
Thank
Well, I don't
you.
know if you want to learn from the last World War.
They
How
took
did
it
it
to
end?
extremes.
Yeah, nuclear
Yeah.
weapons ended that thing.
It's still not a fair way to measure what World War III is, because that is not a guarantee that nuclear weapons are used in a multi-continent conflict.
I don't know.
But you're saying that if there were to be
Nick
World
is
War
saying if
III,
there was,
then
it's inevitable.
It would go to nukes.
It has
no
to
matter what.
end that way.
Yeah,
and that's fair.
There's a
right?
reason we have a triple threat
It's fair, but
nuclear.
is
It's
it 100%?
we can
not
fire
100%.
nuclear missiles from the land, from the sea, and from the air. So
as long as you don't
it ensures.
corner a nation with no other options.
That's exactly what Peter Zeihan argues, right?
Really? I mean, I don't.
That's
follow this.
exactly what he argues. Which I wanted to ask you guys this about, what we did, Americans to Japan, is who really was the stronger nation there, militarily, sloshy segment 2. Is that what you wanted? In many ways, the U.S. was showing up for the first time on the world stage, showing what it was made of. It was like New Kid on the Block. And so it took that aggressor role of preemptive attack, which was very interesting. And it will be very interesting to see how that plays out in the future.
Damn.
Will there be, to your point, Peter Zeihan argues that it would be always a nation of lesser military strength that takes that option, because that is the option to solidify.
You're against the ropes. You got
to pull the. You don't rope a dope at that stage, because
throw
there
the
is no
haymaker.
rope a dope. You
Yeah.
throw the haymaker. Exactly.
Right.
So
That's scary, and that's why I think it's less probable, because you have the
but
shared mutual destruction if you go that route.
Let's play out China invading Taiwan in 2024, like you said.
Well, I also don't know if it's easy for them to invade. It's not necessarily an easy place to invade. So there's 100 miles. The Taiwanese Strait is 100 miles, and apparently it's so choppy most of the time in the year that you can't cross military vessels most of the year. Now China does have these submarines, which they could attack submarines they could probably use, but Taiwanese also geography, there's not a lot of beaches to land on. And then let's say you do land on the beaches.
Normandy.
Or let's say you paratrooper a bunch of people on the land, then you're facing like a dense urban warfare, which is really hard to and we saw it in Kyiv where like Russia had a tough time, getting in. So I think it's not necessarily guaranteed that they're immediately successful if they decide to.
Okay.
So I don't know.
I like that. That gives me hope.
Yeah.
That's nice.
But also,
Just watch it play out for a
China
while.
has like tens of millions of military age men who
feels
don't have like a female counterpart, so they could probably throw a lot of bodies at that thing and not feel a dent.
They're not doing nothing. They're not fucking. That's for sure. They're not.
They were in the past.
They're trying to like propagandize them to start fucking, right?
Yeah, I think it's like have 3 kids now, please.
Have 3 kids now?
Yeah.
One child policy is now
Unlimited.
unlimited. Speaking of unlimited
Yes.
species,
Yeah.
Shall
are
we?
Are we the only species?
God damn. God, let's talk about that new telescope photo.
please.
Well, I mean, you guys saw it. Like it's beautiful.
Yeah,
so what
the
do they call
old
this
James
thing?
Hub.
It's called the James Hub.
James.
No, James Webb.
James Webb.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, I'm way too sloshy.
Okay,
for
so
this.
there was the
James-
Hubble.
Pre-warning. This is not where I want
All
to
right,
be.
let the
for
record
this.
show. I'm switching
Yeah.
to tequila.
So there was a Hubble telescope that like had done
James Hub.
that had done that ultra deep field view, and that
Yeah.
thing blew my mind when that came out. That was like the background photo for my phone for like years. I was like
Yeah.
blown away by that photo. And what we have now is something that does like much clearer photography than what the Hubble did.
That was many, many years in the works,
Man.
and it's a beautiful piece of art.
And like to get people exposed to that is so important, I think. And it's like, it's funny because when I saw that, it reminded me of how infinitesimally small our problems are. And we're talking about markets today. We're talking about
I was gonna say, you thought of that and then you went right back to your shorts to see like how they were doing.
I sure did. I sure did. I went right back to macro
What do you
shit.
honestly think when you think about that? Like when you think about the markets
Uh,
and then you realize the size and scale of your problem in direct correlation to your position in the
So-
universe, what do you really truly feel and think?
So it gives me like a photo like that, right? And this is, I don't even know what they call it. They call the Hubble one the ultra deep field view. I don't know what they call this one, but what we saw is like many like bright images in space are not stars.
We're entirely
They're
galaxies.
spiral galaxies that we're seeing at all times. These are like actual galaxies, not just stars. It's phenomenal. It's like, it's breathtaking to see with clarity, like what's out there. And for me, it just gives perspective. And perspective to me reminds me of like what we talked about on the last episode, or like on the Mexican Parable episode, which is like, what do you actually care about? And like markets I like, but I don't love markets. Like I don't love money. I like having it, and I like achieving things. I don't love it. Like what I love is like talking to you guys. I love my fiance. I love relationships. I love, I love real things here that are like much more core to me. Like even this talk of like World War stuff is like, it's fun and it's interesting, but like, I'm not going to play any role in that whatsoever. Like I'm too old to join the military. I'm like, gluten intolerant. there's no chance.
I'm not kidding. I wouldn't survive out there.
You see those MREs full of grains.
You just ask for a timeout.
Yeah.
Battle. Timeout.
Excuse me, is there cow milk in that?
Tummy ache.
That's like, but to be honest, that is the Gen Z actual meme. Like
That is so funny.
That's like, I know I'm joking.
Okay, so a photo like that, what does it do? Like for me, it's perspective. It's like none of this shit that we're even talking about ever matters, and it brings you back to like the Harvard grant study. It's like what does matter?
Right.
It's like what matters is like just what you love in life, and
So is that where it mostly takes you?
yeah, because it's like it's so big that like little things you just like they just
You
melt away.
Do you feel like you immediately start looking for the true meaning
true
of
meaning,
something?
like true meaning of me though, like not true
Yeah.
meaning
Of it all?
of existence, but just
Yeah.
true meaning of me. And true
That's
meaning of
interesting.
me is like
Different people react different ways to that exact feeling. So you're saying I react by going like, what does this mean for me? Like, it means that I need to love, I need to experience, I need to connect. I need my life to like actually like not be about the markets, but
things that like I have no control over.
Yeah.
Like, just bring it back to the core, because what you realize is like it's all so meaningless and small, right? All this shit we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, like when I see an image like that, I get the nihilist path, which is like none of it means anything. Like,
it's too. Why does a person feel like that? Is it because it's so big that it's just instantly meaningless in the first place? Like
it's
a pebble of sand is not even a good analogy for what we are.
Right, because like
A pebble of sand is too big.
Yeah.
it's too big because you're just looking on the physical scale, which is like we are like a speck of dust on the physical scale. But then you think about the time scale, like billions of years before predate us, and billions of years will come after us. So like then you add the time scale to, you're like, what the fuck does this even matter?
So not just the time scale, but everything that we think about, like the pebble of sand being too small. The pebble of sand on a beach is a monstrous idea, right? And that yet is small for what the universe is. And yet, if you take that entire container of what we're really thinking about and talking about, looking at with the James Webb Telescope, that is 5% of the universe.
Right.
5%.
Oh, they just zoomed in on a little frame. Yeah, that's it.
And what I specifically mean by that is that dark matter and dark energy
I see what you're saying.
make up 95%.
But even within that frame, you could 360 it, and you can see galaxies all around. That was one shot. But then even to make that feel small, you're saying that there's this dark energy that's actually 95% of all matter.
I'm telling you that astrophysics and theoretical approach to the science of the universe itself is studying 5% of possibility.
Right.
That's fucking insane.
Okay, can I tell you guys a story about myself? Because I was so blown away when I saw the Hubble Ultra Deep Field View that I actually went to my dad. I was like, Dad, the only thing I care about is astrophysics. I want to, why did I not pursue this? He goes, well, son, he's like, we all play a role in this world. You're good at markets. You found your niche, and like that is sort of like doing your part for astrophysics, because it allows the big gigabrains to go do what they do, and you just do what you do, and that stuck with me. Like I wouldldn't be a great astrophysicist.
Just for the people that are playing the drinking game of markets right now, I just want to say markets. So that's 5 in the span of like 10 seconds.
I mean, I see that, and I think it's all meaningless, and that you could go down a negative route with that, right? But you can also say, well, if it's meaningless, then I get to create whatever.
Most people don't react that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to go down the negative nihilist route. Like, it doesn't mean anything, so what is anything useful for? What is my life useful for? You can kind of go down a dark hole. But I think the positive view of that, if you want to take it, is that you can create the meaning.
Is that how you personally feel?
Yeah. For mine, it's a massive amount of passive income. But I mean,
you're not joking.
I'm not joking, because it gives me the power to do all the things that Eric just said. Just on my own time with the people I want, as much as I want, whatever. But yeah, I think there's a positive take. And we talked about it when we traveled. When we traveled, that there's like 1,000 different paths to go down in this life, right? And you can assign any one of those 1,000 meanings to your life, and that's maybe the positive take of it.
I mean, what did you think, Armand? Because I think the entire listener audience is excited to hear your take when you saw that thing.
Well, I have a feeling about the image, but I have a feeling about the original question as well. I think we should dive into the original question.
Let's do it.
Where are the aliens? Right? So you look at that image and you ask yourself, I'm one grain of sand on all the beaches of the of my planet, and yet I am nothing in this grand scheme of like the universe. And To the mind, that's actually like asking yourself, like, what does $1 trillion look like? The mind can't really compute that. Like, that level is incomprehensible.
Agreed.
So when you get to the point where you have numbers that are incomprehensible, you lose yourself. What does it mean to lose yourself? You lose your individual consciousness, which is what you developed in the first place while you were here. Like, what a weird, wild feeling. The thing that I evolved to develop no longer serves me. I'm not going to take you anywhere that's going to give you any tangible sense of meaning, because for me, I think that what this all comes down to is that there's this incomprehensible magnitude of what life is. And if I were God, that's the way I would build it. I would build myself the ultimate game that I could get lost in forever.
Like a Sim City.
Like a Sim City, but on exponential steroids and beyond. Like, what's that game that's based on like space that's continually evolving that somebody mentioned in our community recently? It's like a video game where the more you play it, the universe builds itself.
Oh, wow.
So dark matter is, there's gravitation, like there's gravity at play, right? Like dark matter like brings the universe in amongst itself, but dark energy, which is most of the universe, 70%, 68% of the universe, is like, that's what's causing the universe to expand. So when I look at that, I think to myself, and that was like, I think it was in like the 90s when this happened, when like people were expecting the universe was shrinking. And then all of a sudden the universe was actually expanding, and we discovered these types of attributes to the universe itself, that the universe is actually expanding at certain rates, and we don't understand why. And we discovered things like dark energy, and we look at that and we go, we can't actually do the math or the physics with the tools that we have, with the elements that we have, with the tools that we have, with the math that we have, with the science that we have, to understand and put a landscape to the new rules that should exist in this hidden realm. It's literally a hidden realm. That's why we call it dark energy and dark matter. And dark energy is this like expansive fucking force, right? And when I think about dark energy personally, I think to myself,
The Force?
yes, exactly. Thank you.
Joking.
No,
Oh, okay.
Thank you. If I was the Force, what would I look like? What would I feel like? What would I do? And there's so much that we could explore there, but like,
Can't believe you think like this.
I think like this all the time. And like, I can't help it. And sometimes I think there's like, I would love more people. If anyone's listening to things like this, I would love to speak to these people, because, and that's why I love YouTube University, because there's incredible things out there. And yet I know nothing. What's interesting about these thoughts is that some of them, for me personally, feel intuitive, which feels weird to say. But like when I really meditate and I go into the idea and the meditation of like, what would life look like if it were omnipresent, omniscient, like ever expanding, and I was God, what would it look like? I would play a game of hide and seek. That's what I would play. I would play a game where I create a physical universe for myself that I believe personally is rooted 95% in things that are based in consciousness and thought, that we today as human beings aren't studying and don't really pay enough attention to. And I would manipulate myself in a sense to the point where I would forget the true state of what I am in order to create the most insane. So now back to James Webb, like to create the most expansive, beautiful, like alarming in a sense, universe that I possibly could to get lost in that exists now back to aliens that exists at the possibility of probability for the elements that consist of like actual matter and actual energy that we can study to develop themselves into consciousness in forms that then become something that could have the moment to fathom existence and think, what would I do if I were God?
Like I don't assign it to like a god-like force. I just assign it to like entropy. Entropy is like there's a fixed matter of energy in the world, and there's a billion different chaotic ways in which it can be organized.
So
and the direction in which it goes, the universe expands. And that's the way the energy is used. And it's entropy. It's not
and
like a god. Like
chaos aligned our carbon molecules to become human beings, but like it can align in any way.
Yeah, and I feel like the data kind of supports it. Like there are hundreds of billions of galaxies. Some prospects put it to like trillions of galaxies. That's insane.
Let's just call it 1 trillion.
Okay, a trillion galaxies.
Yeah.
Okay. And in each galaxy, there's hundreds of billions of stars.
Right.
Within each
Hundreds
galaxy.
of
And a
billions.
star, just so everyone's clear, is like our star, our sun.
Right. So you're talking about 100 billion trillion.
Yeah.
I think that's, I counted it, it's 23 zeros.
Yeah.
So that's how many like stars there are.
A lot of planets.
So
Lot
within
of
planets.
planets.
Galaxy, you might have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of planets that are in the habitable zone. That can happen. So like my answer is like unequivocally, yes, there are aliens. And you tripped me out, Armand, when you kind of like opened my mind a little bit. I think I forget when this was, but one of our random conversations, you were like, our idea of life is one version, but like there could be like a different form of life.
Yeah, let's go there. So I went into this fucking really heady place right now because I'm pretty toasted. You know, and I love that space, and I enjoy that space. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but I enjoy that space. So let's go more into a tangible space of what these beings are that I think most people are asking, where the fuck are they?
They call it the Fermi paradox, right?
The Fermi
Does anyone know it
paradox is...
here? You know the Fermi paradox?
No, do you have it in front of you?
I don't. I'm not like knowledgeable.
I don't have it off my head
think
where I can go through all 5 stages.
Well, I don't know if there's a 5-stage. Like all I know is that the paradox is there's an overwhelming probability based on the numbers you just mentioned that there's alien life elsewhere, but where the fuck are they?
That's very, very, very good synopsis there.
I think
And
that's
also,
Yeah.
if their light reaches us, if their data or their like the light reaches us, it could have been billions of years ago.
But there are different stages of civilization, which is what the Fermi paradox looks at. So being able to at least like take advantage of your existing like power in your habitable zone, your star is like one version of that. Like for example, like we on Earth are learning how to take advantage of like solar, wind, nuclear.
Yeah, we might be able to go to Mars.
Right,
We might be able
right.
to go to Mars.
So we want to go to another planet. But like being able to inhabit our galaxy is another version of that. And being able to inhabit our like galaxies beyond us is another version. Or excuse me, before that would be our solar system.
Yeah.
Like just our solar system. And then to go into our galaxy and explore would be another version of that, which would mean that we would need to fully absorb the power of our star.
Man.
And a lot of people believe that geothermal is the path to do that. With like full geothermal power, which is something that is like very in its infancy right now, we would be able to really get there.
Do you think there's a civilization out there in the universe that kind of is similar to the movie Avatar, where they're like fully aligned with their environment, with the nature, and not only are they like aligned with it, but like they use the nature in like a positively recursive way, and they're not like
Not just
exploiting it, but they're like
extorting.
aligning with it.
Yeah, man.
And that's like way more advanced than we are.
So I don't want to shit on that. because I love the question and I want to go into it, but I want to go into this idea.
Yeah, let's go.
So most people like view like aliens through the human lens.
Personify them.
Yeah. Do I believe that there's like an Avatar type civilization out there? Absolutely. But do they look anything like what they're like in the movie Avatar? Absolutely not.
Like, are they a bunch of amoebas running around?
Yeah, maybe. like they might be gaseous vaporware fucking beings. And I think that this is what we get wrong about aliens. So like, I think what most people expect us to like talk about when it comes to like where are the aliens is like, okay, Roswell and Tic Tac and San Diego and like all these things that have happened, and we let's talk about them. But like for me, let's just imagine that in another galaxy there's consciousness that has developed into like a physical being that is capable of now transporting itself, whether through the speed of light or has learned how to break the speed of light and break the physics of the universe, because again, that's only 5%, to get where they need to go to show up here to observe us. Okay, let's just imagine they got here. Guess what, Eric? They just crashed in New Mexico. That's a fucking joke. That's a fucking joke to me. Like, the fact that we're going to talk about civilizations arriving here and showing up on our radar, showing up in our fields in the middle of Nebraska is hilarious. These are human desires that we're creating and pattern recognition all the time. Like it's just that's all it is. That's all it is. There's nothing more to that. A true alien in this world, first of all, do I believe they're here? Yes.
Already.
Absolutely.
They're here, or you're saying they
everywhere.
Exist? Okay,
all the fucking time.
Just because we only
been here.
we only perceive our three-dimensional world,
Yes.
or maybe four with time or whatever. But like there are many more dimensions.
We're
perhaps.
working within millions of years.
And just in the way that we
Millions.
perceive the world,
Human is millions of years.
and we're limited by our perception of what we perceive.
Leonardo da Vinci was 500 years ago. He's the goat human. We can save that for another episode.
We'll save that for.
Oh, I can't
bring
wait for
that.
that episode.
He's the goat human. That was
I'm up there.
500 years ago.
You're saying it's a speck in time.
Yeah, it's just it's just literally.
Okay,
nothing.
so you go.
I have a question. So let's say we find undeniable evidence that there is this other life form out there. It's undeniable. 8 billion humans on the earth. Like, holy shit, there's aliens. There's another life form out there. We just talked about World War III, or the potential for World War III. If humans all agree that there is some other life force out there, does it raise our consciousness a little bit and realize, that there is this other life form and there is something greater going on than just Earth, and that we are a human species, one of multiple human species? Does it raise the consciousness level and like tone down like our lower level of consciousness, like the tribalism level of consciousness? Or is it like immediately like we need to build weapons to defend ourselves against this? Like, do we
question.
go up or down in consciousness?
I like what you're saying, and my take on it is that we just redefine our tribe. Our tribe then becomes Earthlings against whatever.
So do we
the fuck
benefit
there
from
is.
that? Does like human species benefit? Like, do we?
Oh, come on.
Do we reconsider
Like
war?
your argument is definitely for humanity.
Well, I mean, I
It
suppose,
means that humanity comes together. That's for humanity.
of course, that we come together, but I don't think it's like I don't think it's a net positive. Like we don't like live harmoniously with the alien beings. Like we still like strap up essentially.
Sure. But like the problems that preceded the alien invasion
Melt away. Yeah.
melt away.
Yeah.
So like
Agreed.
our former problems become.
Agree.
But what if we agree that they don't have any technology to invade us? We don't have any technology to invade them. They're a billion light years away. They could have been extinct by now. But like there's unequivocal evidence. Does it raise everyone's consciousness?
I even forgot to bring something up when we were talking about the World War III thing, where it's like if we become like energy independent globally, right? If we can like harness the power of the sun, if we can like create fission energy. Is that right? Fission, fusion, whatever one fission that we're trying to design right now. No, we're trying to design fusion energy right now. If we can design fusion energy where like we don't need oil, we don't need any of this shit that you're saying like, hey, well, like resources matter for geographic location. What if it doesn't? Like, can that melt away even before like finding alien life? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah. Like we wouldn't need that stuff. Like we wouldn't need to fight each other over oil or like to create alliances over.
We'd fight each other over gluten instead.
I think it spells the end of the world or the beginning of a new consciousness for sure.
Can I talk about something that was mentioned on a Naval podcast probably like ages ago? I wish I would have like revisited before this conversation. So he brought on this like biologist guy who was saying that like he was asking, what do aliens look like if they are around? He's like, well, we can look at evolution as we've seen it here. And he's like, like higher.
That's what everybody does.
Okay, so higher order beings here tend to have similar characteristics. Like
5'7" mixed race. No.
Yeah, you are the ultimate.
All right. Just question.
But he was saying like not every being on Earth has evolved to have a fin, or not every being on Earth has evolved to have a tail, but like almost every being has eyes. Like almost every being has like the ability to see. So like he was extrapolating now to say like, okay, if you look at like other galaxies or whatever, like maybe they follow a similar pattern where it's like, okay, well maybe they don't need to all look like us, but maybe they still have some of the genetic makeup that we see throughout.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
But that's
Movement,
based on
sight,
Yeah.
like certain basic things.
Yeah, and that's what he was talking about. And like
Yeah.
I do think that we can kind of like personify aliens
certain degree.
in that way.
Yeah. But I also think that we're still looking to acutely at the problem.
Yeah, particularly in your view that like we're
The
only
universe
perceiving these dimensions, and like there's like probably a lot going on.
I think there's a lot of people that have dedicated their lives to the idea that thought creates reality in very scientific ways, like not in woo-woo ways, in very scientific ways. And that idea, that construct itself is very powerful.
Yeah, we have no idea what thought is. We have no idea
We
what
have
dreams
no
are.
idea.
Like
We have no, exactly. Thank you. Like the unconscious is the greatest mystery to like sit in front of humans, and the things that happen. I mean, and the fact that like, well, so here's a very controversial idea. The fact that there are parallel universes, multiverse theory is very controversial. Most people believe and have been told that like that is now the predominant idea of physicists. And I think it was Brian Greene that was on Joe Rogan recently that clarified that and was like, look, like that is the predominant idea of like pop culture physicists today. But like still, or it might have been on like one of the YouTube channels I follow, who knows. But the idea being that like, that is still not actually like what is like the lowest common denominator belief of like most scientists today. Okay, so let's just like play with that idea. The fact that there's a chunk even of scientists today that believe that your identity exists in a parallel universe infinite number of times, and what you're really doing and free will is choosing a track of living based on things that have already happened or are happening in this moment.
Totally.
And that time is just this like human construct that you've created, and it's all just happening. It's all just one happening, as Alan Watts would say, is a wild idea to most people. And we can't grapple with these things.
I can't. I'm
It's
just still trying to
difficult.
deal with the size
It's
of one
too
universe,
difficult.
and you're telling me there's multiple.
Dude, I've actually felt it. I felt it in a like this is gonna
Because
sound
sometimes we
stupid,
dream
like,
about it.
Well, I
Sometimes
felt
we,
it on psychedelics. I felt. The
I know you
gears-
did.
I
And we've
felt
talked about this many times.
I literally felt the gears of my actions happening, like changing my outcomes in real time. I felt it.
I think that what you experienced was the true levers of free will. I really do. Because Life is
Like
happening
the optionality
to you.
of free will. Is that what
Yeah,
you're
because
saying?
look,
Okay.
the universe is occurring, and life is happening to you, and yet you have this optionality at all times.
Oh my God, that's my favorite framework is Alan Watts saying that life is happening to you and you are
Doing it.
living at the
You're
same
doing it.
simultaneously. It's like this, like a
He refers
this
to
loop.
it as the analogy of breath,
yes,
which we were on mushrooms.
yes.
When we
That's when it hit
experienced.
me. Like it was a perfect description of what I
See,
felt.
this is why you got to do mushrooms with your friends. Because what he explained was that sometimes you're breathing and it's just happening.
Right, like you can just exist and breathing is going on,
It's happening. And then other times you're like,
and you breathe it in, you hold it for a while,
and you're conscious of it.
and now you're breathing.
And that is in and of itself symbolic of the mechanism of how the universe works.
Yes,
That's fucking wild.
Okay. It seems more dumb now that we're not on mushrooms, but
No, I still
know-
love it.
I
It
know
still
when-
works for me.
When the mushrooms were on, I was like, "Yep, that's it."
Nick's like, I don't know what you guys were on, but it wasn't mushrooms. I think it's a beautiful idea. So just to go a little deeper on aliens specifically, do you guys believe that like some of the stuff that has occurred in like on our planet is like potentially real? Like, have we had?
Well,
Negatory.
I'm not fully believing the idea that like aliens are here, like you're saying, but I am open to the notion that like we're not perceiving the ways that they could be here because we only have our five senses. That's all our faculties.
That's the same thing though.
Yeah, I know, but like I'm allowing that option to exist, but I'm
You just don't want to know it's there.
well, I'm not believing it because I haven't perceived it. So it's like it's hard to just like
If you don't
have, like-
perceive it, to me, it's not there.
but like a tree does fall in the forest without you perceiving it, and it did fall.
Right, but then you can go walk over that tree and be like, it fell. There's evidence. But like in the case you guys are talking about, it's not. And like I think most cases are like some perception bias that happens with humans, and they would like to see things happen. And
Well, the
like
stats.
they take your
just the-
tinfoil hat.
The
and-
law of large numbers, is completely on Armand's side here. Like aliens should certainly exist. Whether
If
or
they
not,
didn't
whether
exist,
or not they're here.
like, can you imagine a universe where they don't exist?
So I googled it a minute ago. The Andromeda Galaxy, right? Like
Which
you
is
said,
the nearest
that's
galaxy.
the nearest galaxy to us. It's 2.35 million light years away. We
Yeah.
can't even go to Mars. Like, there's a high probability there's aliens around, and we just like can't get to them, or they
probably in
can't
the
get
same
to us.
galaxy.
They could
I
be
just
like
don't. I see. This
they could
is
be
where,
literally next
no.
door, and we
If
just like
you have evolved to the point where you are a multi-galaxy multi-planetary, multi-galaxy species, you are aware of all the life forms that exist in your.
But this has to go back to
habitable
our
zone.
AI conversation because there's no fathomable way you can travel 2.35 million light years. It's going to take traveling at the speed of light, which is the fastest speed you can ever travel. It's going
Nope.
to take 2.35 million years to get there.
Not until you bend the rules of physics.
Right. It's physics as we understand it now. Good point.
Correct, which is 5% of the entire reality of reality.
Sure.
So I think that if you get to a point where you, Jesus Christ, Mushi. I think if you get to a point where you have extrapolated the power of your solar system and your, Mushi, let's calm down, and your galaxy, then you better have gotten to the point where you can exercise like that ability. Like it's just an inevitability.
I mean, just dealing
to me.
dealing in probabilities alone, as an investor, I would obviously put my money on there is other life outside. Like clearly,
Okay.
clearly.
What are people buying when when the world realizes there's life outside? Telescopes?
Guns.
Guns?
What are
right.
they buying? What do they buy?
Maybe they're not buying anything. Maybe there's not like a
That's what
economy
I
that
want to know.
exists.
What is their economy?
Are we made?
What is
from-
their market?
I got a
Drink,
question.
bitch. What is their market?
I got a question. Are you guys believers that we are just made up and comprised of like stardust?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're all. You think there's more base elements than
No,
we
I'm
observed?
asking.
Literally or spiritually?
No, I'm like literally. Because I'm asking because if it is, then of course there's because we are dust from the stars. There's dust from the stars everywhere. Like of course.
Literally, I think there's no better argument.
That's it. Like we're made from the if we're literally made of energy and dust of space, then we've seen so much space just in this photo. Like of course there's other life. There's no question.
A lot of people have made it their life endeavor to.
And no proof. Fair me.
What if it's something you can't prove? You just can't prove it.
Because it's a limit of human.
Because there's a bunch of microbiomes swimming around on a galaxy that's 1 billion light years away.
Because it's Armand's point where the game was designed to never let you know, but just like it's just like
That's good game mechanics.
I think the moment
great
you
game
know,
mechanics.
like if we want to, I don't know why I went there on the first fucking point, but the moment you know, it's game over.
it's kind of boring now. It's like
No, it's game over.
well, finding one is not game over.
Finding one is not game over, but I think that the root of the idea of nirvana is that. I think nirvana is a very interesting idea.
How important is nirvana to you?
Personally,
Yeah.
well, I don't think about nirvana
Is nirvana
specifically.
the achievement of knowledge or the pursuit of knowledge?
It's definitely not the pursuit.
Because I do feel a bit of nirvana as I pursue knowledge.
Sure. I guess I don't think about this phrase often. I don't have like a feeling about this word, this idea. But I think that what you're addressing is unification, oneness, where it all comes together in one holy moment where all things are known, right? Is that what you're describing?
Well, you'll never know everything, but
But that is what nirvana is
is
meant
that
to.
what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't studied as much theology as you.
Well, I think that's what it's aiming to describe in a human level. And I look at it as like a God level. That's all. I think that like maybe an interesting question is like, what would you do if you were God?
And you're saying that you would get your jollies off the intrigue,
Off the game mechanics.
off the game mechanics. I like that.
I don't know what else there is. So again,
Just to
back
see
to
how
our
it all
friend
sort of
Alan,
unfolds.
you know, he's had certain clips go viral, which thank God, because
Talking about Alan Watts.
Alan Watts, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a sage.
Is he dead, by the way?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
In the 90s.
Would you put him in our goat of goats conversation at some point
I would.
Okay.
It depends how many I'm allowed.
for a future episode?
I think the goat conversation is going to be strictly your list.
No. First, I think Steven's going to have a lot of
Yeah.
goats. Barry Bonds might be up there.
Steven's going to be like, who?
He's an East Coaster. He's more a Tom Brady guy.
Michael Jordan. No, but I think that it depends. That's really what it comes down to. It's like Alan Watts is somebody who was trying to bring Eastern sort of ideas and mysticism to the Western world as a whole. And I think that those ideas are very valuable.
Does Alan Watts have a take on aliens?
I
Do we
don't
know?
I don't know.
Shocked you don't know that.
Yeah, I don't think I do. Yeah,
He's probably a believer.
probably.
He's an optimist.
Yeah. I don't know. So, do you guys think that at the end of the day, they exist or not?
Yes.
Of course exist. I just don't think they're here now.
Here, like watching us and fucking probing
Highly
us?
improbable that is the case. But highly probable they exist.
And I'm also a believer of the fact that we meaning the human race, as we continue to evolve, we're going to be the aliens to a lot of other species. Like we're going to go there, and they're going to be like, holy fuck.
You think like a flash of a Hiroshima nuclear bomb like just hits them like a million years from now, a billion years from now? Like, what was that?
Or maybe just like we as like spacemen go actually to another planet, and there's going to be some
Let's
little
hope so.
primitive life form that's like, oh my god.
Is Elon onto something there?
I think he's right in the extent that like it is more interesting from our perspective if you're a multiplanetary species. Life gets more interesting.
Well said.
Man.
All right.
That's a good place to wrap it.
Yeah.
I feel like that one topic could go for like 6 hours.
Can't wait for the
And I would like to propose that we go back to it, get high, maybe smoke some joints, do a different kind of or that. Yeah, I think it could go to some good places.
Cool.
Sounds terrible for the listener.
Sounds terrible. You're like, I'm not doing that. We love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Hit us up in the Discord. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Hit us up in the Discord, alfalfapod.com. We love you guys. See you next time.
See you.
Peace.